like space age sounds. Hi, welcome. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. Before we get started, I present a disclaimer. This channel isn't a polished audiobook production, and I'm not a professional narrator. It's simply a place to read, reflect, and think out loud. So, whether you're listening while in bed at night or up and working, cleaning house, or winding down, just know I appreciate you spending some of your time here with me. Today, we're continuing with chapter 5 of Chaos by Tom O'Neill. If you enjoy long form audiobooks, history, truth seeking, and thoughtful discussion, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you for being here with me again. And I'm excited to start this one. Can I also say something? Somebody very close to me is traveling to Spain right now. Hello, Kenneth. Kenneth from Connecticut. Does anybody ever say that to you? And Divining Rod, hello. All right. Yeah, I didn't finish my thought. Kenneth and Jennifer, hello. That's right. I remember. Welcome back. Are you guys listening together? Are you watching? Are you the kind that watch on a TV? Am I big in your living room right now? Yes, thank you. To your channel? You got a channel? You guys too. Thank you. You're a friend of mine? A friend of mine? Kenneth and Jennifer Russell. Do I know y'all? We can be friends. We're all friends here. Somebody close to me in is traveling to Spain. Spain, Italy, France, Italy, Spain. And I'm like, cool. Well, here's how you get updates from the US embassies. Keep in touch. And then, like, I come to find later that this person didn't take their cell phone. Like, you going on a like, global trip without your sticking cell phone. Yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely like, for real, of all the things to leave home without on that kind of a trip. We got a big chapter. I think I'm gonna go through it all today. And I have to I'm realizing if I want people to see this, and I've gotten a lot of new viewers because of my midnight lives, that I have to do it that way. So I'm hoping some of my hi Mary, see, I'm hoping that some of my tried and true are able to catch me. It is Saturday, right? Is it Saturday? It's Sunday. Oh, because it's midnight. Yeah, it's been Saturday. And we're on to Amnesia at the LA County Sheriff's Office. Did you guys see my latest post? I remember that kid who was dressed in scrubs. Everybody's like, that was from the 11th. I'm like, are you sure? I feel like they were already out of there by the time he showed up. I was just kind of getting caught up on some comments and stuff. Let me look at it. I mean, the kid was certainly dressed in scrubs and behind police lines with a rifle at UVU. Make it make sense. Except, I mean, we're going through it. Yeah. Oh, it was a while back I posted it. Or did I not? Was that something I just? No, there it is. Diligent Dennison, actually. Russell Kennington was released with no bail just hours after he was arrested with a rifle at the Charlie Kirk assassination crime scene. Imagine that. He was wearing blue scrubs and one of them white coats, but some kind of red hoodie also. I wonder if you remember this guy. I remember it. And I remember how quickly it was forgotten about also. Make sure I don't have anything sketchy on here. Do you remember that kid? You remember him? I do. And I thought for sure it was the 10th. Maybe I'm wrong. There's been a couple of comments where they said, no, that was the 11th. And it doesn't look crowded wherever he's being walked. So maybe just hours after he was arrested. What was he there to do? Do ya? Skinny Rabbit. Cool. I love Clutch. I have a hoodie I wear, and it's been nice how it introduces people to you. So you know what you're getting when you meet somebody in the wilderness with a Clutch shirt on. All right, I'm gonna shut this and I'm gonna take a drink and we're gonna get to reading. It's getting juicy. Oh, let me get an Alp first. Skinny Rabbit, what's your name? Good to meet you. And if you want to go in my community area section and post your tattoo, I'd love to see it. That'd be cool. All right. Alps. Can you guys hear me okay? These didn't work yesterday. Let me know if you have any trouble. All right. Amnesia at the LA County Sheriff's Office. Keep going, in quotes, which I read as Max. The 13th anniversary of the Tate LaBianca murders passed with no story, at least not in premiere. That didn't worry me, not at first anyway. I knew that Jim Meigs, the magazine's editor in chief, shared my obsession. He started leaving the due date blank in the contracts I had to sign every month, a reporter's dream come true until it wasn't. Within a year, I'd interviewed more than 500 people, movie industry players, friends, and relatives of the victims, witnesses, journalists, cops, attorneys, judges, suspects, and hangers on. My one bedroom apartment in Venice had become a hoarder's nest of Manson ephemera. I installed shelves above my desk to house a growing collection of books and binders. I bought the thickest ones I could find, with labels like news clips 67 through 69, timelines, trial transcripts, questions, witnesses, and so on. They multiplied as if they were breeding. When my friends visited, they'd stop in their tracks upon entering my apartment and cast worried glances my way. Above my computer was a whiteboard with Manson circled in the center. Springing from his name like a psychedelic spiderweb, there were lines in erasable ink leading to associates of the family who'd never been publicly identified before, Hollywood drug dealers, and other names that had seldom been uttered in 3 decades. I tried to interview as many people as I could in a day, so my work days became endless. I was always behind, needing to hop in my buttered, my buttered Acura to drive to the Valley or San Diego or Santa Barbara for an interview at a moment's notice. When I wasn't interviewing, I was researching, arranging my binders, or working the phones to set up more interviews. I'd basically adopted my neighbor's German Shepherd, Bully, who spent day and night at my house. I sometimes worried my files could be stolen, and I felt safer with the dog by my side. My magazine assignment was coming to feel like a vocation. Manson and the other theories surrounding him were always on my mind, whether I was alone or with friends. Though, in the hopes of wrapping up my story, I was alone much of the time. Since Meigs was authorizing my extensions, he would visit me on trips to LA. We'd sit on the floor as I spread out documents for him to examine, kicking around various explanations for the discrepancies in the case. Excuse me. He was a reassuring presence. The things that seemed suspicious to me bothered him too. As long as I had his confidence, I could keep putting in long hours. At that point, the end, the break, the big scoop seemed just around the corner. Looking from a document to a name on my whiteboard, Jim would nod and say, "Yes, yes, I see. Good. Keep going." And I did. Political piggy. The Tate LaBianca murders are etched into the public's imagination. They are, in casual conversation, what people mean when they say the Manson murders. 2 nights of unhinged bloodshed that came out of nowhere. It's too often forgotten that the family had taken another life by then. Gary Hinman, or Heineman, 34, lived in a secluded house in Topanga Canyon, a hippie community about 15 miles south of this Bond Ranch. A soft-spoken Buddhist and music teacher, Hinman, I think, had treated Manson and his followers with a dignity that few afforded them. He hosted members of the family for long stays in his home. He was generous when they needed food or money. In July of 1969, the increasingly agitated Manson was convinced that Hinman had just come into an inheritance of some $20,000. Seeing green, he ordered 3 of his followers, Bobby Boussolel, Boussolel is my best, Mary Brunner, and Susan Atkins, the last of whom would later participate in the Tate LaBianca murders, to seize Hinman's money by any means necessary. The 3 showed up at Hinman's on July 25th. Manson was wrong. He said there would be no inheritance. Or he said there was no inheritance, but they refused to take him at his word. They tied him up and ransacked the place, but there was no cash to be found. Manson decided to see for himself, coming over with Bruce Davies, another family member. But even Manson couldn't extract anything from Hinman. Finally, incensed, Manson drew a saber from a sheath on his belt and cut Hinman's ear in half. He and Davis left the house, but he told Boussolel and the girls to stay until they found the money. For 2 days, they battered and tortured Hinman, who insisted he had no inheritance. They also sewed up his severed ear using dental floss. By day 3, Manson had had enough. He wanted Hinman dead. Over the phone, he ordered his followers to take care of it. Boussolel tied Hinman up and stabbed him at least 4 times. As Hinman incanted a Buddhist prayer, Atkins and Brunner took turns holding a pillow over his face until he stopped breathing. Just as Manson would do in the Tate LaBianca murders, he told his followers to leave signs implicating the Black Panthers. They dipped a rag in Hinman's blood and smeared the words "political piggy" on the living room wall, surrounding it with bloody paw prints. Some of Hinman's friends grew concerned. On July 31st, not having heard from him in 6 days, they drove over to check on him. They found his body and called the cops. Charles Gunther and Paul Whiteley, homicide detectives from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office, went to investigate. They spent 5 days searching the crime scene for evidence and conducting interviews. Although no one had seen or spoken to Hinman in the days before the body was discovered, it seemed that a woman had been in his house answering the phone during his captivity. At one point, when a friend of Hinman stopped by, she'd even answered the front door, holding a candle and explaining in a flimsy British accent that Hinman had gone to Colorado to see his parents. The detectives issued an all-points bulletin for 2 vehicles missing from Hinman's driveway, a Fiat station wagon and a VW microbus. 7 days after the body was discovered, the Fiat turned up on the side of a highway in San Luis Obispo, 189 miles north of LA. Inside was Bobby Boussolel, fast asleep. Beau, so Bo, Soleil, Solel, Bo Solel. Anyway, a state trooper took him into custody, and Gunther and Whiteley hurried to question him. Ken, thank you. Oh my gosh, you guys love my shirt. Oh my, thank you. Boussolet. Thank you, Abby. Boussolet. Boussolet had concocted a story that blamed the Black Panthers for the murder, but he kept muddling the details. First, he said that he hadn't known Hinman at all. He bought the Fiat from a Black Panther a few days earlier. When the police told him they had found the murder weapon in the Fiat's tire well, he half confessed. Sure, he'd been in Hinman's home, but he didn't kill the man. He and two women, neither of whom he could identify or would, had arrived at the house to find Hinman bloodied and beaten, complaining that a group of Black Panthers had robbed him. They stayed and nursed Hinman back to health. A sign of gratitude, Hinman gave him the Fiat. The murder, Beausoleil speculated, may or must have occurred after he and the girls left the house. Maybe the Panthers had returned seeking more money. So why was the knife in his car? He couldn't explain, nor could he say why he'd suddenly changed the story. Gunther and Whiteley were confident they'd found their man. They charged Beausoleil with first-degree murder and booked him into the Los Angeles County Jail on August 7th. But they knew he had at least one accomplice, the girl who answered the phone and front door during Hinman's captivity. The next day, according to Bugliosi's narrative, Manson decided it was time to kick off Helter Skelter, his all-out race war. He ordered the Tate LaBianca murders, making sure again that his followers left signs at the crime scenes implicating the Black Panthers. Anyone might wonder, how could the police fail to connect Hinman's murder to the Tate LaBianca killings, giving their macabre similarities? It's a good question, and the official answer, even when I first read it in Helter Skelter, stretched credulity. Part of the problem was simply a matter of jurisdiction. The Hinman murder occurred outside the city limits of Los Angeles, so it was an LA County Sheriff lasso case. The Tate LaBianca murders were handled by the LAPD. The two police forces didn't talk much, as you might expect. In fact, as Bugliosi tells it, it was their failure to communicate that led them to overlook Manson in the first place. I got a different stool. It's much shorter, but it's slippery, and my pillow is shifting. Hello from Germany. Julie, I'm so glad you found us. Or you found me. It's just me. It's us in the chat, though. We have a cool group of folks who gather here. Charlie did get shafted repeatedly. JC, the massage therapist, thank you for the compliment. Sorry, is scaring your cats. Thank you. My hair is messy and up and scraggly, but somebody told me to wear makeup yesterday. I'm like, I'm going to just look spent today. All right, I think we're caught up. Amazing. It's so cool to see people from all over the place. And we get to like think about the same things at the same time. That's kind of cool. So now I got to find where I'm at. San Luis Obispo, Lasso, okay, it's LAPD, they don't talk to each other. Okay, by August 10th, the day after the LaBiancas had been murdered, Gunther and Whiteley had connected Hinman's murder to Manson. They knew Bobby Beausoleil had spent time at the Spawn Ranch, living with a strange group under the control of an ex-con named Charlie. And according to Bugliosi, the two detectives did the right thing. They rushed to the county morgue, where the autopsies of the CeeLo Drive murder victims, I think I just said autopsies. I didn't mean it. Thank you, Miss Lobster. Look at you. I was going to tell you um, after your message. Hi, sweet lady. That's fine. I saw a lobster stuffed animal today, and I almost took a picture of it and sent it to you, and then you sent me that message. So, just saying, we were on the same length. Anyway. Mm-hmm. So he went to the morgue where autopsies of the CeeLo Drive murder victims were underway, and they reported their suspicions to the LAPD. A sergeant named Jess Buckles heard them out. Wasn't it curious, they said, that both Hinman and Tate murders involved brutal stabbings, plus some iteration of the word pig smeared in the victims' blood near their bodies? They explained their suspect, Beausoleil, had been living out in a disused movie ranch with a bunch of hippies led by a guy who claimed to be Jesus Christ. Their theory fell on deaf ears. Sergeant Buckles didn't see the connection, especially not if the hippies were involved. He told the Lasso detectives that they were barking up the wrong tree. The LAPD was already pretty sure that the Tate murders were a drug deal gone awry. And so Bugliosi argued the lasso led withered the lasso lead withered on the vine, and shoddy police work kept the Manson family at large for 2 months longer than they otherwise would have been. They weren't taken into custody until a pair of raids nabbed them on October 10th and 12th. Even then, their arrest was for stolen vehicles. The police couldn't connect them Tate LaBianca for more than another month. While they were at large, Manson and the family may have killed dozens more people, Bugliosi speculated. In the official narrative, Manson had a lot of sheer dumb luck. Not only did he evade these early suspicions against him, he also survived, ostensibly on a technicality, the largest police raid in the history of California. On August 16th, 1969, Lasso descended on Spawn Ranch in Mass, just past. That got me. Let's see those bad Larrys. What? Put your earbuds on and close your eyes, friend. All right. Everyone was still asleep. Just past 6 in the morning, the sun was creeping up and most everyone was still asleep. More than 100 officers swarmed the property, led by the organization's elite SWAT team. Armed with handguns, AR 15 rifles, and tear gas, they were assisted by 2 helicopters, numerous ATVs, and a fleet of some 35 squad cars. Surrounding the ranch's 200 acres, they descended from 5 prearranged outposts with a show of force the likes of which no one in Lasso had ever seen before. They arrested everyone in the family, 27 adults, 7 juveniles. They confiscated 7 stolen cars and a vast cache of weapons, including an automatic pistol and a submachine gun. One officer praised the raid's military precision, telling me it was the most flawless executed operation I'd ever been involved in. The raid had nothing to do with the murders. In the preceding weeks, deputies had been keeping the ranch under close surveillance, perhaps even sending undercover agents to investigate. They suspected that Manson was running an auto theft ring out of Spawn, stealing Volkswagens and converting them into dune buggies. It would seem like a coup, wouldn't it? Even if they had no knowledge of the murders, sheriffs had just picked up Manson and everyone involved with him on suspicions of crimes that were damning in their own right. Had the family been formally charged, they would have been sitting in jail already when the cops realized they were behind the killings. But the family wasn't charged, despite the preponderance of evidence: the cars, the guns, the numerous sightings of Manson and his followers with stolen vehicles. The entire group was released 3 days after the raid. No questions asked. Thanks. Hello, Mike. Welcome back. All right. No questions asked. Where was that? No question. They had been let go. No questions asked. Seems like a coup. No questions asked. There it is. Bugliosi explained in Helter Skelter they had been arrested on a misstated warrant. His book downplayed the size of the raid. You'd never know it was the biggest in the history of Los Angeles law enforcement at that time. He also took it as a given that Gunther and Whiteley, seasoned and widely respected detectives, would back away from a lead to the most prominent unsolved murder in California history. It seemed to me that they wouldn't do that unless they were told to. I wanted to get the story straight from Gunther and Whiteley. What they told me was, at the very least, the story of an agonizing series of coincidences and near misses, a comedy of errors that had never been given a proper airing. At most, it was the germ of an extensive cover up by Lasso, which moved to conceal either its own ineptitude or something more sinister, the hand of a higher authority, warning that pursuing Manson would come with steep consequences. Leave a sign. Paul Fitzgerald, the defense attorney, gave me Charlie Gunther's number. Gunther was the most honest cop he knew. when he'd taken the liberty of telling me the retired detective, or of telling the retired detective about my research. Gunther said that he might be able to help me. When I got Gunther on the phone, he already knew what he wanted to tell me, but he refused to say it. I had to come to his house, he said, more than 100 miles away in Victorville, California. I tried to wrestle a hint out of him. Sounding exasperated, he said it had something to do with Bobby Beausoleil and maybe a call that had been made. After a pause, he added, and the destruction of evidence. The very next day, I made the 2-hour drive to Victorville. If you're driving from LA to Vegas, it's just about the last place to fill up your tank before you're surrounded by the endless vastness of the Mojave Desert. The town is an oasis of man-made lakes and sprawling golf clubs, all catering to the community's many retirees. Among them, Charlie Gunther, who welcomed me into his new condo dressed in a white t-shirt and shorts. I sat on an overstuffed couch beneath a framed painting of forlorn Jesus in prayer at Gethsemane. Gunther sank into a large recliner, though he was seldom relaxed enough to stay in it for long. Gunther was famous among true crime devotees. He had become something of a staple in the genre, his skilled investigative work having solved a number of notable murders. His better-known cases included the Cotton Club murders and the 1958 killing of the author James Elroy's mother. Gunther never solved that crime, but Elroy still hailed him in My Dark Places as one of the best homicide detectives ever to work for or in LA. Most everyone wrote about Gunther, noted his penetrating blue eyes, his unruly mop of hair, now gone white, and his stocky build. Listening to him talk, I could see why Gunther was so highly regarded. But that day he was also nervous, jumpy. He wouldn't let me tape our conversation, saying that smart cops never allow themselves to be recorded. As the words came spilling out of him, I tried to get every utterance on paper while appearing nonchalant, lest he become even more inhibited. He remembered going to the Tate autopsies with his partner Whiteley, or is it Whitley? Whiteley, to tell the investigators about the similarities between the Hinman murders and the Tate murders. The coroner, Thomas Noguchi, had already reached the same conclusion. They must be connected. I know, Charlie, I know, Noguchi told him. Same knife, same wound, same blood on the wall. But the LAPD detectives weren't nearly as receptive. They were convinced it had something to do with narcotics, Gunther said. I turned the conversation to Bobby Beausoleil. The mere mention of his name launched Gunther out of his recliner. He lies, and I can't tell you how I know that. Of course he lies, I said. Didn't all murderers? He called the ranch after he was arrested, Gunther said, pacing in front of me. To his mind, it was this phone call that had initiated the Tate LaBianca murders. The sole motive for those murders was to get Bobby out of jail. Oh, my back. Oh, my back. Mason, I'm reading this book. Nothing dirtier than the CIA, that's for sure. Hi, Craig. I'm glad to see you here. Happy Sunday, you guys. Happy day. Where was I? Anyway, I'd heard this all before. The copycat theory of the murders, Bugliosi had discredited it. The copycat theory of the murders. Bugliosi had discredited it, I reminded him. That name didn't set well with him either. Arrogant son of a bitch, he shouted. Vince didn't want anything to do with the Hinman case. Hinman was a nothing case. Vint didn't want to prosecute it. So Gunther didn't buy into the Helter Skelter motive? He absolutely didn't, he said, sinking back into his recliner. He thought Bugliosi made up the motive to sell books. No one in law enforcement believed it either, he added. As soon as the family's Linda Kasabian flipped and became a prosecution witness, the entire motive for the murders changed. Gunther slouched in his chair, his great paw of a hand rubbing his forehead. When Beausoleil called the ranch from jail, according to Gunther, he said, "Tell Charlie I've been arrested for killing Hinman." Gunther was sure about this because there was a recording of Beausoleil's call. Knowing that he had accomplices in the Hinman murder, police had tapped the phone at the men's jail and recorded the calls he made. On August 8th, the day after he was booked, Beausoleil called the Spawn Ranch and told the person on the other end, allegedly Linda Kasabian, that he'd been arrested for Hinman's murder. "I need help," he was heard telling her. "Leave a sign." Interesting that they had to tap jailhouse phone calls back then, like it wasn't already something you do. That night, Sharon Tate and her friends were killed, and Susan Atkins scrawled the word "pig" in blood in the front door of the Silo house, just as she'd done in the wall at Hinman's. Gunther believed this was the sign Beausoleil referred to. Atkins hoped to exonerate Beausoleil since he was in jail when the Tate LaBianca murders had taken place. Manson's followers were, in effect, imitating themselves on a more devastating scale just to free one of their own. After that, they could escape to the desert. Essentially, the wiretap was the best evidence for the copycat theory of the murders, and Gunther had never told anyone about it. He was visibly anxious to get off his chest after 30 years, something shaking at his seat. In his seat. Sometimes shaking in his seat. My bad. Miss Host is not a trans shoes. Oh. JFK 2027. That's funny. Anyway, yeah. Dude, hashtag save the tomboys. Yes, please do. I gave you it. You're my go-to, and I'm so happy to see you. I can't play music. I'll get copyright struck. Was Mike being naughty? I thought it was JFK. That's all right. All right. All right. Yes, it's good to drink water. It's good for your body. So, oh yeah, I botched that sentence like ridiculous. Where was that? He was sometimes shaking in his seat. So he was visibly anxious to get it off his chest after 30 years, sometimes shaking in his seat. But he worried that it would overturn the verdicts against the convicted killers. "I don't want this reversed after all these years," he said, pounding his fist on the arm of his chair. Gunther's intensity moved me. He seemed on the verge of tears, but I couldn't figure out why he decided to reveal the recordings now, after all these decades, and why to me. Surely other journalists had sniffed around before. I asked if he had a copy of the tape. No such luck, because the wiretap was illegal. His commanding officer, Captain George Walsh, had ordered him and Whiteley to turn over the recording. Walsh apparently destroyed it or made sure that someone else did. Interesting that even prisoners had more rights than we do now. Anybody notice that from what we're reading? So, but if any of this was going into my premiere story, Gunther didn't want to go on the record alone about it. He needed someone else to say it with him, someone who could verify the tape's authenticity. Ideally, someone from the other side of law enforcement. He named Aaron Stovitz, who had been Bugliosi's co-prosecutor. I said co-conspirator, which I think is more accurate. Huh? What? Unless you're more sad? What, water makes you sad? Or what are you talking about, Craig? Gunther was sure that the detective had brought it to him before it was destroyed. Who, Stovitz? Okay. Get Stovitz to say it, he urged me, tears welling in his eyes. Again. Say, Charlie Gunther gave me this reluctantly. Say I owned up after a long conversation and did it reluctantly. Ask him how it can hurt. Promise me. I don't want them all back out on the street and I'm worried this will do it. I promised him, but I still didn't understand why Walsh had destroyed the tape. Even if it were illegal, it so clearly solved the Tate LaBianca murders. The day after they occurred, at that, he said it would eliminate the narcotics angle, Gunther told me. That startled me. Why would Walsh, who wasn't involved in the LAPD investigation, want them to pursue what he now knew was a false lead? Talking to Gunther reminded me of something of an old issue of Rolling Stone. Aaron Stovitz had given an interview to the magazine in June of 1970, right before the trial started. He mentioned exactly the phone call that Gunther had just told me about, though he'd couched it in more uncertain terms. Couch, Couched, all right, using the pseudonym Porphyry and speaking in the present tense. Stovitz told magazine that Bobby Beausoleil puts a phone call in at the ranch telling them that he was arrested and telling them he hasn't said anything. Now, this is the only supposition on my part. I don't have This is only a supposition on my part. I don't have any proof to support it. I suppose he, meaning Manson, said to himself, how am I going to help my friend Beausoleil out by showing that the actual murderer of Hinman is still at large? So I know that Melcher used to live in this house on CeeLo Drive. Go out there, Watson, with these girls and commit robbery and kill everyone that you see there. Don't forget to leave. And this is very important because in the Hinman's case, they wrote political piggy in blood. He said, don't forget to leave a sign. Given that Gunther had used that exact phrase, leave a sign, I was almost sure that none of this was a mere supposition on Stovitz's part. But he never divulged how he knew about the Beausoleil phone call. Would he admit to having heard the tape? I doubted it, but I interviewed Stovitz once already, and he was cagey. He said he was always convinced that the Tate LaBianca murders were copycat crimes, but he wouldn't say why. When I asked him why the case wasn't prosecuted that way, he said it was because Bugliosi called the shots. And sure enough, when I paid him a second visit, Stovitz was even more aloof. He denied ever having heard the Beausoleil tape. He heard rumors of it, he conceded, but never from Gunther. He dismissed me with a message. Tell Charlie Gunther, Mr. Stovitz had a great deal of faith in you, but unless you have some notes, it didn't happen. I called Gunther and I could hear him wilt on the other end of the line. Is that how he wants it? Then let's just drop it. I was deflated too. Just as easily as he had given me the scoop, Gunther was prepared to take it back. You're just not going to be able to use it, he said, that's all. As if to prove how thoroughly he'd given up, Gunther began to change his story. When I talked to him again 2 weeks later, he said that he'd neither seen nor heard the tape. He only knew of its existence, exactly Stovitz's position. This was going to be a lot more difficult than I thought. I drove all the way to Vegas to speak to Gunther's former partner, Paul Whiteley, whose demeanor was the polar opposite. Where Gunther would bound about the room, pacing and shaking and pleading, Whiteley barely moved. We sat among graceful Chinese porcelain pieces. His wife was a collector, and he was as serene and contemplative as the figures depicted in the china. He remembered the Beausoleil tape clearly. I heard it, yes, he told me. Something about leaving a sign. And he corroborated the story of Captain Walsh's infuriating response. Walsh was by the book captain. Walsh was a by the book captain. He hit the roof. Like Gunther, his investigation had made him overwhelmingly confident of one thing. Helter Skelter didn't happen. So many veterans of the case, I noticed, were willing to say that the prosecutor had basically fabricated a motive, using Manson's ramblings to button up his case. Helter Skelter was not a motive, Whiteley said, but a philosophy. Bugliosi was well aware of this. He just didn't care. And that meant he couldn't care about the subtleties of the Hinman case either, or about how Lasso might go about prosecuting it. The Beausoleil wiretap was maybe the single biggest break I'd gotten at that point. It's so late, babe. You got to try. You got to turn your lights off. You got to close your eyes. You got to take big, deep breaths. You got to continue to do that for a while. I love you so much. I love you. Good night, babe. Good night. Hi, Professor. Hmm. Helter Skelter didn't happen. So many veterans of the case I noticed were willing to say the prosecutor basically fabricated a motive. I know I already read that. It's a philosophy. He didn't care about how they were going to. Okay, the wiretap may have been the single biggest break I'd gotten at that point, but the stories around it had begun to multiply. Gunther would eventually allow me to use him as an on the record source, but his account muddied the waters more than it cleared them. Despite their bombshell evidence of a copycat motive, both he and Whiteley insisted that they simply gave up after the LAPD told them to. Although they knew Boussolet, silent L, he had an accomplice and that he'd call someone at the Spawn Ranch. They never even drove out there to question anybody. They didn't track. That didn't track. Not with these guys. The biggest circus. Around the time I'd reached an impasse with Gunther, I began to research another figure from the county sheriff's office, one whose scintillating claims about Lasso and Manson had circulated for decades among counterculture enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists. Preston Gilroy, once a Lasso detective, had left the police force under a cloud of suspicion in December of 1969, immediately after the LAPD had announced Manson's apprehension. A couple of years later, in 1971, Gilroy gave an interview to Mae Brussel, a cult favorite radio host whose show trafficked in conspiracies, some plausible, others outright loony. Reading through the transcript, I found myself more intrigued by Gilroy than I wanted to be, especially in light of what I'd gone through with Gunther and Whiteley. Gilroy's thesis was this: Manson had gotten away with far too much at Spawn Ranch in the months before the murders. Even though he was a federal parolee, Manson had no job. He had ready access to drugs, alcohol, underage girls. He had a cache of firearms, and Lasso officers knew all about it. At Lasso's Malibu station, Spawn was in its jurisdiction. Manson's lawlessness was something of an open secret, Gilroy said. Firemen patrolling the ranch's fire trails had even encountered Manson and the family toting machine guns. And yet Manson never paid a price. The cops always looked the other way, according to Gilroy. That was because his station had a policy handed down from on high: make no arrests, take no police action towards Manson or his followers. And so, despite the raft of crimes that Manson and the family were committing, they were never apprehended, and Manson never had his parole revoked. There was even an occasion where Manson was picked up by Lasso police for statutory rape, but they ended up cutting him loose. Even as the station instituted this hands off policy, they kept a close watch over Manson. Gilroy was sure that Lasso's intelligence unit, or some other intelligence unit, was running surveillance on Spawn Ranch. He alluded to memos about Manson with cover sheets to protect against prying eyes that went straight to the station captain. And who knows where after that. Gilroy didn't think the surveillance was just a local thing. Then came the murder of Gary Hinman, and soon after it, the Tate LaBianca murders. How had Lasso failed to see this coming? They'd been monitoring Manson constantly. Gilroy theorized that the massive August 16th raid on Spawn Ranch was Lasso's effort to cover its tracks after the murders. Calling it the biggest circus I've ever been involved in, he marveled at the fact that all the charges had been dropped 72 hours later. Something didn't add up about the raid. All that force, all those arrests for nothing. It was like we were doing something perhaps a week late to show that we had really been watching, he said on the radio. But that raised a bunch of problems. If the sheriff's office was surveilling Manson before the raid, it would have known enough to bring him in for the murders. If it wasn't watching him, then if it wasn't watching him, then how had it amassed enough evidence to get the search warrant authorized for the raid? When the LAPD held a self-congratulatory press conference to announce that Manson and his group were suspects in the Tate LaBianca murders, Gilroy decided to become a whistleblower. He went to a news station, KCAL, and told them everything he knew, thinking the press would be all over this story. They hardly touched it. Worse, the leak cost him his job. Lasso's internal affairs department got wind of his remarks and sent him packing. After his departure, Lasso did all it could to discredit him. An internal memo said that no one should discuss his previous employment here. It implied that he was a drug addict and an unrepentant leftist bent on smearing the office's reputation. Listening to Gilroy's radio interview, I couldn't say if he was a crackpot or not. He was airing a version of events that a year before I would have dismissed as sheer lunacy, and he was doing it on a radio show that traded in unadulterated paranoia. But this message resonated with me, especially now that I knew how much had been covered up. Gunther had convinced me that the tape of Boussolet's phone call was real, and I never would have believed that either. It seemed possible, if not entirely plausible, that there was still more to the story of the sheriff's office, especially its bungled raid on the Spawn Ranch. I added Gilroy's name to my whiteboard. One more in the jumble of cops and Hollywood has-beens, witnesses reliable and unreliable, with fading memories and ulterior motives. Then I picked up the phone. He wasn't hard to find. He ran a private detective agency paired somewhat oddly with a traffic school out of a strip mall off the highway in Riverside. When I drove out to visit him, I was relieved to find him calm, confident, even fearless. Portly and white-haired, his mustache still flecked with red. He had a strong recollection of what he had told Mae Brussels back in 71, and he stood by all of it. As we spoke, I noticed he had a weapon in a pouch on his desk, along with some model police cars. His diploma and graduation photo from the Sheriff's Academy were hanging on the wall behind him. Despite his contentious end with Lasso, he remained a proud cop. We were told not to bother these people, he told me, referencing the family. The order came in a memo from his captain. Tell him whatever we saw or heard. That was one of the first things that I was told when I got to Malibu. Peter Pitches, the sheriff of Los Angeles County at the time, was memo-minded, Gilroy explained. He exerted immense authority, and that authority extended to his officers' conduct with Manson. We were asked to generate memos every time we had contact with any of the members of the family, Gilroy said. Despite this intense period of information gathering, Manson was never charged when he was arrested. Why was a law-breaking parolee allowed to go free? A lot of times we arrest people and the DA would say, we can't keep this person in custody, he's too valuable. We want him on the street. My suspicion is that Manson was left alone for a while, for some reason. I don't know. It was very unusual that someone with a record like Manson would be left on the streets. The shock of the Tate LaBianca murders, Gilroy thought, forced the sheriff's office to hide its own intelligence gathering efforts. If Manson were guilty of homicide, how could anybody possibly say we let him on the streets? There would have been civil liability issues. Careers would have been destroyed, and of course, it would have cost Pitches the next election. But that didn't explain why the police allowed Manson to go free for another 3 months after the Tate murders. Knowing he could have killed more people, why not just arrest him right away and keep their surveillance program quiet? Gilroy had no idea. He'd been asking himself the same question. All he knew was that Manson was under some kind of loose surveillance by our department or somebody else. We know he is being watched by somebody, but we didn't know by who. The thing is this, if he was under surveillance, those people left the ranch on 2 occasions, committed the 7 homicides. Why was there no intervention? He added that there was no legal obligations for Lasso to intervene. They could have chosen to let the murders pass without action. If Manson were so important that they didn't want to risk interrupting their surveillance, Gilroy was fairly confident that someone from Lasso knew right away that the family had committed those murders. Probably someone saw them come and go. There was a long entry someplace, and then, of course, later they found they went, and all hell would have broken loose. Mm-hmm. Manson felt like a god. Yeah, because of all this, he's like, check it out. I can do this, and nobody cares, even though I'm on parole. That would have definitely assisted him in brainwashing his subjects, or whatever you want to call them. Plus, he reiterated, Lasso never could have launched such an extraordinary raid without sound intelligence, enough to persuade a judge to grant a search warrant. You don't mount a raid without surveillance like this, he said. More infuriating still, none of it stuck. The sheriff's office went to all that effort for nothing, and it didn't have to be that way, Gilroy was sure. We did find evidence of enough criminal activity, stolen property, narcotics, to violate Manson's parole in the first place. It was astounding. I never could figure out why he was released. Gilroy had been part of the operation that day, and he remembered finding stolen purses, wallets, pocketbooks with IDs, all damning evidence, and all seemingly ignored. After the raid, he said, the surveillance ended, as mysteriously as it started. In another interview with the writer Paul Krasner, Gilroy explained, it appeared to me that the raid was more or less staged as an afterthought. There was some kind of grand plan that we were participating in, but I never had the feeling that the raid was necessary. He speculated that Manson was never arrested because our department thought he was going to attack the Black Panthers. Their intelligence had revealed that Manson had shot Bernard Crowe, whom he mistakenly believed to be a Black Panther, in July, and this apparently convinced Lasso that Manson was going to launch an attack on the whole organization. Of Gilroy's many outrageous claims, this was maybe the hardest to swallow, but again, he stuck by it when I asked him. I believe there was something bigger Manson was working on, he said. Cause a stir, blame it on the Panthers. I've got to believe he was involved, based on all the info we have. Maybe a witting player in someone else's game. When Manson was finally brought to justice for the murders, Lasso took dramatic precautions to hide its surveillance from the ranch. I thought what they were doing was illegal, Gilroy told me. All the crime reports disappeared from this station. Everything was gone. All of our reports were gone. Normally, you had access to your own reports. They were all gone, disappeared. The whole file was gone, and the memo went up that no one involved in the Spawn Ranch raid was to talk to anyone outside the department. That convinced Gilroy to go to a reporter, the move that cost him his job. I found Gilroy credible, if overheated. I knew I wanted to believe him, and that put me at risk of falling into the great trap of conspiracy theorists who come to believe in grand plots simply because they make the world a far more fascinating place. Certainly, I'd have a more interesting magazine story on my hands if Gilroy were correct, but that was a big if. I was in touch with a number of former Lasso deputies at this point, and I collected their opinions on Gilroy. One described him as a kind of off the wall guy, another said he had a gigantic chip on his shoulder and hard feelings for the sheriff's department, always feeling that he was being beset upon. According to the most pejorative story I had heard, Gilroy had once tried to kill himself in the most dramatic way possible. He had barricaded himself in a motel room in Malibu, I believe, and one of the inspectors was trying to talk him out of the room. He was threatening suicide and had an automatic weapon. I asked the officer if he'd witnessed this firsthand. I wasn't actually there, he said. I just heard about it in the station. John Graham was the inspector who talked him out of the room. Gilroy called the allegation bullshit, reminding me that Lasso had embarked on a campaign to discredit him after he left. They tried to put me out of business, basically. It was goodbye, we'll see you, never darken our door again. I was crazy, malcontent, a loose cannon. If he'd really barricaded himself in a motel room, he said, produce a report. Neither Lasso Files nor the media would have any record of it because it never happened. Ask Captain Graham where the hotel was. What was the date? Tell him to put up or shut up. In so many words, I did. I called Graham, who, like his colleagues, had a negative opinion of Gilroy. But had the man really barricaded himself in a motel room? Not that I know of, Graham said. Once I told him the story, he changed his mind. Now that I recall, I did hear that there was probably some phony attempt at suicide, but he hadn't been there. However reliable Gilroy was, and I came to feel that he was largely reliable in the end, I was in a familiar predicament. I needed documentary evidence to back up his claims. My best shot was leering at me from the pages of Helter Skelter, the search warrant for the Lasso's massive raid. If Bugliosi had found it, couldn't I? All right. Couldn't I? Oh. So on the paper trail again. Charlie Gunther was weary of appearing in my story, but we still talked a lot. When I told him I wanted Lasso's files on the Hinman case, he made a phone call. Next thing I knew, I had a backdoor access to the office's closed case archives. With some directions and the name of another retired deputy sheriff scrawled on a piece of paper, I parked at the Sheriff's Training Academy in East LA and knocked on the door of a windowless, barracks like building. The deputy let me in and walked me through rows of industry filing cabinets, stopping in front of two and leaving me alone with them. I pulled up a folding chair and opened the top drawer. It was crammed with disorganized documents that appeared not to have been handled for decades. In the silence of the large, dim shed, broken only by the occasional sound of gunshots from the nearby firing range, I began my search. The crux of the reports, to my delight, covered sheriff's activities at the Spawn Ranch over the roughly 16 months the Manson family had lived there. Over the next few months, I made half a dozen visits to the hangar at the Sheriff's Academy. The retired detective was always happy to see me. I suspected I was the only other person he saw all day. When I had questions about language or codes in the report, or even lasso procedure, he'd patiently explain them to me as I took notes. And he let me photocopy documents, but only after reviewing them first. After a while, he barely glanced at what I brought him, instead reminding me how he preferred his coffee. I'd always return with a cup when I ventured out to a Kinko's nearby. I wasn't entirely surprised when I learned several years later that these visits of mine were completely unsanctioned and unknown to Lasso top brass. In one of my earliest visits, with great relief, I found a copy of the search warrant for the August 16 raid. Although other researchers had since uncovered it, at that time it had never been seen by anyone outside of law enforcement. Once I read it, I could understand why. It revealed that Lasso had a far broader understanding of the Manson's criminal activities and his guru-like control over his followers that had ever been shared with public. Running to 16 pages, the warrant was rooted in the testimony of Deputy Sheriff William C. Gleason, who sought permission for Lasso to recover stolen automobile parts and rifles, automatic pistols, and revolvers from the Spawn Ranch. Charles Manson was the only suspect identified by name in the document, which stated that he was unchallenged leader of the crime ring and also on federal parole for grand theft auto. The last bit is crucial. It means that Lasso was officially aware of Manson's parole status, or if the police turned up any stolen vehicles or weapons, and they did, of course, he would be in violation of the terms of his release agreement and would have to go back to federal prison. If Manson was aware of the fact, he didn't act like it, and the police had already shown a willingness to look the other way. The search warrant related an incident from an Officer Williams of the LAPD. He told Deputy Gleason that within the last 2 weeks, he and his partner were on duty at the Spawn Ranch. Mr. Manson was bragging to the officers about the weapons that his friends had rifles trained on the officers. Procedure whenever officers Oh no. Oh no. Y'all, what's up, Senior Squeaky? So, was I out for a while, Craig? What was the last thing you remember me reading if you were following along? I know you're busy. Greetings. Hi, guys. Hi, Nick. Hi, Jennifer. I love Buffalo, New York. I had such good times there. Yes, ma'am. You're 5 minutes behind? Crap. Abigail. Oh, excellent. Jennifer, I feel like we just became friends. I love that you like this. Um, it just did this, the circle of panic, and it said reconnecting. So I'm so happy that you're here, Jennifer. All right. You don't know, are you a fan of Every Time I Die? they're they're right up there with Clutch for me. Mm, 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 mm. Oh, okay. Oh, that's fine. That's fine. It's like it's New York hardcore. Although the hardcore scene would be like, nah, they're less, probably because they got so big. Anyway, I don't know where to start reading because I looked up and my phone was reconnecting. Anyway, Manson had flouted the law and bragged about it to LAPD officers as he had his followers train rifles on them, something else incidentally not reported in Helter Skelter. Manson's cavalier, taunting behavior continued. Elsewhere in the warrant, the LAPD's Ted Lee said he had found 3 loaded ammunition clips from a carbine that fell from a dune buggy while on the highway, sometime on or around July 29th. Lee soon heard from Manson himself, who said the ammunition was his and that he would stop by and pick it up. So Manson, a paroled ex-con with a known history of violence, had simply called up the cops and asked them if he could come collect the ammunition he had lost. And he'd done this a little more than a week before the Tate LaBianca murders. Manson, the warrant noted, had been mentioned in prior memos, which fit with Gilroy's insistence that police knew how dangerous he was. Whether that awareness was the result of surveillance was an open question. The warrant explained that Lasso deputies had cultivated an informant at the ranch, someone who has seen guns in practically every building on the property. The informant was also threatened by Charles Manson, and there was extensive reconnaissance by the same officer, Lee, who flew over the Spawn Movie Ranch approximately August 1st, 1969, and observed a 1969 Volkswagen lying in a ditch. How often did the LAPD use planes to investigate car theft? Why were they flying over the ranch, which was out of their jurisdiction? Manson was prepared to match their vigilance. Per the warrant, someone in the family had bragged that we have a guard at each road in to the ranch with a rifle and a telephone, so if anyone comes in, we'll know they're coming. Another memo quoted Manson telling a fire inspector, "Don't try to play the man because the next time you try it, you'll find yourself hanging from a tree upside down, dead." And 2 days before the murders, an informant told an LAPD sergeant that Manson was on his way back from San Francisco with a young runaway girl and a large amount of narcotics. The memo was partly correct. Manson had been in Northern California then with a young runaway, but he'd been in Big Sur, not San Francisco. Who knows if Manson had that large amount of narcotics or if they played a role in the bloodshed to come. In any case, the document shook me, It suggested that authorities had tracked Manson with plenty of diligence and with the help of an informant in the days before the murders. They had a reliable sense of his comings and goings from the ranch mere hours before he dispatched his killers to the Tate house, and yet somehow it took them months to pin the murders on him. Given the abundance of evidence, it came as no surprise that the raid had been authorized. Manson was practically begging for the strong arm of justice to come swooping in. When it did, the police got more than they bargained for. I found a one-page arrest report for Manson dated August 16th, the day of the raid. In addition to the stolen cars and weapons, the arresting officer wrote that Manson had 4 stolen credit cards in his possession that day. They fell out of his shirt pocket when he was taken into custody. This had never been reported before. In summary, Manson, the known federal parolee, walked away from an arrest that caught him with stolen cards and credit cards, an arsenal of weapons, and underage runaways. And meanwhile, 2 of the Lasso's best homicide detectives failed to realize that the biggest raid in California history was going down, the very same ranch that their murder suspect had called. Hundreds of man-hours and 0 indictments. Bugliosi, you may recall, had chalked up the failure to a simple mistake. The search warrant was misdated. But now that I had it in my hands, I saw no evidence of any misdating. The warrant was clearly dated August 13th, 1969. According to the California Penal Code, a warrant is good for 10 days after its date. The raid was completely legal on August 16th, a fact I verified with many police and attorneys. Was there another potential explanation? Ed Sanders went a bit further in the family. In addition to the misdated warrant, he wrote that the family was let go because of insufficient evidence. To figure it out, I talked to Bill Gleason, the sergeant who'd written the search warrant, and spent 2 weeks organizing the raid. We spoke often. I found him quick to smile and patient with my questions, even when I implied that he had been negligent. Gleason was still furious at Bugliosi and Sanders for impugning his reputation with their talk of misdating. They had led millions of readers to assume that a clerical slip-up had invalidated the hundreds of man-hours that went into the raid. The insufficient evidence excuse, Gleason told me, was closer to the mark. The problem was that none of the evidence, stolen vehicles, guns, could be linked to any of the suspects, most especially Manson himself. It was all scattered around the ranch. What seemed in the warrant like an airtight case turned into more of a fishing expedition. It was pretty hard when you got 27 adults there to prove who actually stole a car, Gleason told me. They tried to dust one of the vehicles for fingerprints, but it had been sitting out in the dirt for so long that they got nothing. The warrant specified Manson's body to be searched for car keys and small parts because he was said to be the leader, Gleason said. But do you sleep with your car keys? I asked, thinking it was ridiculous to expect to find them on Manson's person at the crack of dawn. No, Gleason said, laughing. At 6 a.m., we don't know what they were going to be doing. What about the stolen credit cards? They were found on Manson's person, having fallen out of his pocket shirt. Couldn't they have prosecuted Manson for those? Yeah, we could, Gleason said, but we didn't know how he was going to have credit cards when we were doing the search warrant. We didn't know he was going to have credit cards when we were doing the search warrant. It was the DA's call, and if he says we're not going to prosecute him, there's not a whole lot I can do. Robert Shern, the DA who signed the warrant for the raid and then dismissed the charges a few days later, was still working at the Los Angeles District Attorney's office, so I set up an interview with him. Surrounded by plaques and awards, Shrin greeted me with a warm hello and told me to take a seat opposite his desk. Like Gleason, he said that it was hard to bring charges in a case where the thefts couldn't be linked to anyone. But what about the credit cards? It's been so many years, Shrin replied. I don't know if I was told about the credit cards. If they're in the report, I assume I would have been shown the report, and I would have been able to determine that there were, in fact, some stolen credit cards attributed to him. Maybe Manson was never caught attempting to use the cards. He couldn't recall. So you just don't remember what went into the decision, I asked? I really don't. He looked a little sheepish, and the silence lasted a beat too long. All I did was just fill out the card and went on to my next case. My inner skeptic had trouble taking Gleason and Shrin at face value, but let's say they were right, that the colossal raid of the Spawn Ranch had failed to yield any arrests worthy of prosecution, and that it was only a freak coincidence that it brought them so close to the group responsible for so many murders. Even if you believe that, Lasso isn't free and clear, because a week after their botched raid, the sheriff's deputies arrested Manson again on totally different charges, and again he was allowed to go free. On August 24th, the owner of a property adjacent to the Spawn Ranch alerted Lasso sheriffs that someone was trespassing. Deputies drove out to find Manson and a 17-year-old girl, Stephanie Schramm, in an abandoned cabin where they just had sex. On a bedside table were several joints, and the Lasso brought in Manson once more, this time on a felony pot possession charge and for contributing to the delinquency of a minor. As with the raid, published accounts of this incident are thin at best. Bugliosi kept it out of Helter Skelter altogether, and Ed Sanders makes only passing mention of it in The Family, writing that Manson and Schramm, that's a different, same last name? Different. Shrin and Schramm. I love that. I love that there's Shrin, Schirn, Shern, I guess, and then Schram. Who's Schramm? Schramm. Stephanie Schramm, the minor. All right. Sheern and Schramm pisses me off. Rich McZiggy, thank you. Unk alert. Are you calling me an unk? So Schramm were released because there was no pot in the cigarettes, only tobacco. Oh, they just keep letting him go. So however, according to an arrest report I found in the Lasso files, the joints did contain pot, and on August 26th, the sheriff released Manson anyway, instead charging Schramm with a felony possession, even though she was a minor with no criminal record. No reason was given for the decision. The day after Manson's release on August 26th, a judge signed another warrant, this time for Manson's arrest, on the strength of his having been found with drugs and a juvenile. This time, Lasso detectives never even bothered going to arrest him. Something else none of the 40-plus Lasso officers I interviewed could explain to me. And something, again, left out of Helter Skelter. Manson stayed at Spawn Ranch until he moved to Death Valley around September 10th. The DA's order rejecting the pot charges against Manson was signed by Monty Fligstein, the deputy district attorney of Van Nuys. Incredibly enough, like Shern, Fligston was still working in the DA's office. When I called him, though, I found him much warier than Shern had been. I gave him a quick rundown of the files I found. Manson, Schramm, marijuana, delinquency of a minor, ringing any bells? I have no recollection, he said. Do you recall investigating Manson at the time of August of 1969? I didn't participate in any of the Manson issues at all, he said. I offered to fax him the documents so he could verify his signature. He said he didn't want to be involved and hung up. The Lasso deputies who'd arrested Manson were flabbergasted when he wasn't charged at any point after the raid, especially given the effort of the raid itself was a bunch of bullshit. Yeah, Abby, I was thinking that too. You don't know what those things are? All right. Well, thank you. Either way, it's kind. All right, bunch of bullshit. I already said they failed, but there was no more ample reason. Nope. Okay, the deputies and the DA had numerous chances to get Manson behind bars, right? Yes. Or to keep him there, and they failed. Even if none of Manson's charges were prosecutable, they were egregious enough to send the parolee back to prison. Bugliosi said as much in Helter Skelter. During the first 6 months of 1969 alone, Manson had been charged, among other things, with grand theft auto, narcotics possession, rape, contributing to the delinquency of a minor. There was more than ample reason for a parole revocation. If lasso officers did try to get Manson's parole officer to send him back to prison, I found no written record of such a request in the files. No one I spoke to could even agree on whose job it was to report a federal parole violation. The DA said it was the detective's job. The detectives said it was the DA's job. And at the end of the day, everyone said, wasn't it the parole officer's job? It's always been a problem, Bill Gleason told me. That guy would never get arrested and released. Oh, Bill Gleason told me it's always been a problem that guys would get arrested and released before the PO could place a hold. Then again, I had it on good authority that it was precisely Bill Gleason's duty to have told the parole officer, and he didn't. I felt like I was trapped in the swirling eddies of some forgotten bureaucracy. Maybe Manson was just the beneficiary of a simpler time when police had fewer forces at their disposal and cruder methods of communication. Samuel Barrett, who was Manson's parole officer at the time of the murders, told me he had never been informed of the August 1969 arrests. If a parolee was involved in a crime at the local level, he said it was paramount for the DA to file charges. Otherwise, it would be hard to send anyone back to federal prison. But sheriffs, the DA, I said, they all said it was up to you. They passed the buck, Barrett said. It's all hearsay without filing charges. Chasing Kitty Lutzinger. While Bobby Beausoleil was busy torturing Gary Hinman, he left his girlfriend behind at the ranch. Kitty Lutzinger, 16, was pregnant with his child, and in his absence, she set off a chain of events that gave the sheriff's office another chance to nab Manson. Ooh, we're over an hour. Murder doobies. That's funny. Hi, heretic. All right. They passed the buck. Swirling eddies. Samuel Barrett, who was Manson's parole officer at the time of the murders. Oh, yeah. Chasing Kitty. Lutzinger had moved out to the Spawn Ranch to be with Beausoleil, but she'd never been a perfect fit for the family. Now that she was pregnant, Manson mistrusted her, fearing that she'd compel Beausoleil to leave the group and raise their child. Lutzinger, in turn, was uneasy around Manson. He was always speechifying about the end of the world, fooling around with guns and heaping abuse on anyone who crossed him. So, with her boyfriend showing no signs of returning anytime soon, Lutzinger ran away from the ranch. Got to get my Alp right. Lasso's sheriffs found her on July 30th and took her in for questioning since she was a teen runaway. She told them everything she knew about Manson, that he was an ex-con who threatened her life and her relatives if she left the family, that there were drugs and guns stockpiled at the ranch, and that many of the family were runaway girls. Police sent her home to her parents in the San Fernando Valley, but she'd proven so informative that Bill Gleason drove out there to interview her again 11 days later in preparation for the big raid. This would have been on August 10th, just a day after the bodies had been found at Silo Drive. I couldn't find his full report in the Lasso files, but Ed Sanders wrote about it in The Family, and he included an eye-opening detail. Lutzinger asked Gleason if the Black Panthers were behind the Tate murders. I'd been programmed to believe it was the Panthers who did it, she told him. That remark should have raised a red flag. The timeline is the key. This conversation took place when the bodies at Silo Drive were barely cold. As Gleason knew, Lutzinger had been away from the Manson family since August 1st, when she had fled the ranch. So if she had, in fact, been programmed to believe that the Panthers killed Tate, the programming must have occurred before the murders by someone who was responsible for them. Gleason should have suspected that Manson, or at least someone at the Spahn Ranch, knew more. He told me he had no memory of discussing the Tate murders with Lutzinger, and found it unlikely that he had. The murders had only occurred a few hours before. There probably wouldn't have been anything much on the news at the time. In fact, the bodies had been discovered more than 24 hours before he interviewed her. They had dominated the news. In fact, the bodies had been discovered more than 24 hours before he interviewed her, and they'd dominated the news. So before then, there's a semicolon there. Anyway, even though Lutzinger had cooperated with police, she apparently couldn't decide where her allegiances were. On August 15th, she ran away again, fleeing her parents' home and returning to the Spahn Ranch. That same day, Gunther and Whiteley, still searching for accomplices in the Hinman murder, though for some reason they never checked the Spahn Ranch, learned that Lutzinger was Beausoleil's girlfriend and immediately deemed her a person of interest, issuing an all-points bulletin for her arrest. On August 17th, the day after their colleagues raided the Spahn Ranch, Gunther and Whiteley visited her parents. I found Whiteley's interview notes in the Lasso files. Lutzinger's parents confirmed that she was pregnant by their main suspect and that she'd been living at the Spahn Ranch until August 1st, and that she'd run away again the night before, though they didn't know where. Whiteley did note that Manson was personally. I frustrate myself sometimes. Yes, they were talking about Warren Beatty earlier. He comes up again in this book. Mm-hmm. Kenneth. Yeah. Yes, it is fascinating. And the first time I read through this book, I couldn't put it down. But I had to. And I had mentioned this before, but when I first read through this, they had dumped the JFK files. And then Charlie Kirk was assassinated. I had been reading it. I was trying to do a chapter a day, but I kept getting distracted. I mean, I finished it, and it was that long ago that I had read it. So it's nice to get a refresher with you guys. Lutzinger. That she found Whiteley's interview notes in the Lasso files. Lutzinger's parents confirmed that she was pregnant, blah, 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 and that she had ran away August 1st, and that she ran away again. They didn't know where. Whiteley did note that Manson had personally phoned the Lutzinger home the preceding week and that Kitty had spoken to him. In fact, at the very moment of that interview, Kitty Lutzinger was in Lasso custody. She had been picked up with the rest of the family in the raid. And here, to my mind, the credibility of the Lasso deputies stretches to its breaking point. Gunther and Whiteley had just posted the bulletin for Lutzinger's arrest. They had just learned she'd been living at the Spahn Ranch along with their primary murder suspect, and yet they didn't go to the ranch to look for her. They did nothing. All they had to do was stop by, and they could have learned that everyone from the ranch was in jail at the Malibu station. They could have gone there, interviewed Lutzinger, and potentially cracked the Hinman and the Tate LaBianca murders 4 months earlier than those crimes were. Why didn't they go? For 2 reasons, Gunther told me. First, he and Whiteley never heard about the August 16th raid, even though their colleagues conducted it, and it was the largest in state history. Bill Gleason backed them up on this. We were 2 independent units, he told me. We really had no reason to contact each other or even knew about the investigations going on. Gleason said he purposely kept everything quiet about the raid, but he had also said that a few stray LAPD squad cars had found out about it somehow and came along uninvited. Plus, as Bugliosi reported in Helter Skelter, the raid was on the front page of the local section of the next day's Los Angeles Times, beside a story about the still unsolved Tate murders. Gunther's second reason was that Kitty Lutzinger's parents told him they had already been to the ranch to look for her, and they'd been told that she wasn't there. But did he really expect a runaway's friends to turn her over to her parents, especially when everyone knew the cops were sniffing around for a murder suspect? He didn't even attempt an answer. We just sat in silence for a while. Gleason had organized the raid. It would seem that it was only a matter of time until he realized that Lutzinger, whom he'd interviewed just 6 days earlier, was sitting in one of his jail cells, while homicide detectives sought her out. He'd given me copies of his files on the case. One of them, a timeline of the investigation, had an entry dated August 17th, 1969. Whiteley and Gunther tell Gleason that Lutzinger is wanted for questioning in Hinman's murder. But Gleason told me that he didn't even know Lutzinger was arrested during his own raid. She'd been booked under a fake name because everyone in the family used aliases. I reminded him that he'd already known that. It was in the search warrant affidavit he wrote before the raid. Lutzinger herself had told him. Plus, one of the arrest reports of the Lasso files said that he'd taken it on himself to learn the true identities of each suspect. He was unmoved. She was just another face, he said. I had a lot of things going on that day. I doubt if I could have recognized her, or would have. Lutzinger was released with the rest of the family on August 18th and remained with them at the Spawn Ranch until mid-September, when they all moved to Death Valley. No one ever went to the ranch to look for her, despite the all points bulletin out for her arrest. The last time I saw Gunther was in January of 2005, when I visited him to go through a timeline I'd made of his investigation of the Hinman murder. I told him that I couldn't believe he'd never went to the Spawn Ranch to solve the case. The police had Bobby Beausoleil in custody, and they knew he'd called the ranch asking for help. They knew his girlfriend lived there. They knew he'd stolen 2 of Hinman's cars. If nothing else, surely they would have gotten a warrant to search his last known residence, the ranch, for evidence of the theft. But Gunther stuck to his story. He looked at the floor and said, "Maybe we just made a mistake." I wasn't a seasoned crime reporter. Most of what I knew about the criminal justice system I'd gleaned from the news, police procedurals, and legal thrillers. So I went to Kimberly Kupferer, the chairman of the criminal law section of the California State Bar, and asked her to walk me through the standard operating procedure in murder investigations. Kupferer contradicted Gunther on every point. She said it was standard practice to go to a murder suspect's last residence, whether it's a ranch, motel room, or rat hole, to search for evidence, especially in a robbery homicide like the Hinman case was. The fact that the detectives didn't go was highly unusual in her estimation. Though I knew I was really pushing my luck, I made another call to Gunther in February of 2005. I know you've always told me you'll never hear an untrue word from Gunther or Whiteley, I said. But is there anything you haven't told me that would make me better understand your actions in this case? No, he said faintly. Okay, I said, one last question. Were you ever told by anyone to back off of the Manson family or the Spawn Ranch in your investigation of the Hinman murder? No, he said again, this time almost inaudibly. I was not. I couldn't ask Whiteley the same question. After my first meeting with him, he refused to speak with me again. Chicken shit. Oop, I can't do that. Sometimes seemingly ancillary people would completely refocus my reporting. Such was the case with Louis Watnick, the former head deputy of Van Nuys. I wanted to talk to Watnick precisely because he had nothing to do with the Manson case. He worked in the same office as the DAs who had, so he could offer some valuable perspective without feeling boxed in. I went to visit him at his house in Thousand Oaks. I can still picture him shuffling to the door, a frail, thin man in his 60s, with wispy brown hair, a nice smile, and sad eyes. Suffering from an illness, he spoke in a labored, rasping whisper, His home was air conditioned to frigidity. He spent a while reading my documents in silence, and then he sighed. Chicken shit, he croaked. This is all a bunch of chicken shit. The size of the raid, the fact that the DA's office kept releasing Manson when they had enough evidence to charge him, or at least violate his parole. It dovetails right in, he said. Manson was an informant. It was only a guess, he conceded, but an educated one, based on his 30 years in the job. My pillow is traveling. It wasn't the first time he'd heard the theory. No, it wasn't the first time I'd heard the theory. One of my lasso sources had wondered if Manson had his finger in a bigger pile. Having been in the office's intelligence division, he'd seen stuff like this before. What happens in those situations is either he's giving up somebody bigger than himself, or he's on somebody else's list as far as a snitch, or he's ratting out other people. And if he were informing on someone else, the DEA or the feds, no one in the lasso would know about it necessarily. Robert Schern, the DA who authorized the raid only to dismiss the charges, had made the same suggestion. Another possibility, sheer speculation, is that Manson may have been an informant for somebody, but Lasso deputies had all denied it. Of course, Watnick said when I told him that confidential informants means they're confidential. Neither of us could say what or who it was that Manson would have any decent information about. Drug dealers? Watnick wondered if it had a political dimension, giving Manson antagonistic relationship to the Black Panthers. Maybe, he continued, muttering more to himself than to me, it was someone big, possibly the FBI. True, the search warrant was littered with references to Manson's fear of the Black Panthers. He thought the group was about to attack the ranch. One memo I'd found even said that Manson claimed to have seen carloads of Negroes on the property, photographing the family. A fire patrolman reported that family members had told him they moved into the canyon because they'd killed a member of the Black Panthers. You know, there's an old saying, an enemy of my enemy is my friend, Watnick said. So if Manson figured out this black and white confrontation, he may have been giving out information to the FBI, who had a vendetta against the Panthers. Hearing this from Watnick, someone in the DA's office, but unaffiliated with the case, boosted my confidence. Looking at the lengthy search warrant again, he kept grumbling. Helicopters, agents carrying automatic weapons, 3 different departments, 4 weeks of official surveillance. They had this massive raid and everybody released 2 days later. He shook his head. The more that he released, the more I felt he was released, because they'd get more out of him by having him released. Oh. He said they'd been watching this guy for something large. The thing that I wonder about is who was watching. Watnick urged me to go back to Gleason. He knew the detective well, he said, and he trusted him. Why did Gleason just roll over when the DA's office undid all his hard work? As for this notion that Manson's parole officer couldn't find him in violation without charges from the DA, that's bullshit too, Watnick said. As promised, I went back to Gleason, who calmly and adamantly denied that Manson was an informant. He didn't even see a glimmer of a possibility. I'm sure that I would have heard something like that, he told me. I never heard anything, even if he was an LAPD informant. I'm sure I would have been contacted by LAPD. I never heard a word, he added. That guy was a jerk. Every cop I talked to wanted to get him buried. Then why had all of them failed? I couldn't stop turning it over in my mind. The image of Watnick, hunched over my files in his chilly home, grumbling with such certainty. Manson was an informant. Coda, a huge no-no. I did most of my reporting on Lasso in 2000. In the year 2000. As with all aspects of my investigation, I kept thinking that I'd return to the key subject someday. and try them again, seeing if the passage of time had loosened them up somehow. I imagined a cascade effect. Once I got somebody, say Vince Bugliosi or Terry Melcher, to admit to a major cover up, other areas of the case would begin to open up, too. Or I could brandish an incriminating document that would change people's minds. But you can guess what happened. I kept reporting, and time had other plans. In my obsession, I began to think of the story as a puzzle I could solve. If only I recovered all the pieces. I listened again and again to my interview tapes. I wrote out intricate timelines, listing my subjects' every move, day by day, and sometimes hour by hour, trying to discern who knew what and when they knew it. I kept lists of possible explanations about gun laws and parole laws, car theft laws, and most critically about how those laws were written and enforced in 1969. By 2005, I've moved away from the lasso angle of the story, but I found myself constantly thinking about it. I knew I had to take another look at the archive to fill in some blanks. I was under the impression that I could go back anytime. I had interviewed more than 40 deputies over the years, making no effort to hide my reporting. One of them had told me that the sheriff himself, Leroy Baca, wanted to learn about what I was doing and offer the sheriff's department my cooperation. No, and offer the sheriff's department's cooperation. I don't know why my brain just adds words for no reason. You can't blame that on dyslexia, can you? Beausoleil. Heretic, I'm so glad you subbed. Thank you, Kenneth. Kenneth and Jennifer. Right? Kenneth and Jennifer. All right. When I've been to the lasso, nope, where was I? Moved away, no one except, no, I missed something. I read something ridiculous. I tripped over my words. I'd moved away from okay, I knew I had to take another look at the archive to fill in some blanks. I was under the impression that I could go back any time. I'd interviewed more than 40 deputies over the years, making no effort to hide my reporting. One of them had told me that the sheriff himself, Leroy Baca, wanted to learn about what I was doing and offer the sheriff department's cooperation. There it is. But no one, except evidently the pair of retired deputies who got me into the archive in the first place, had any idea that I accessed the lasso files on the case. When I called the main office and asked to go back in, they were, to put it mildly, enraged. From the first officer I spoke to all the way up to Sheriff Baca, the response to my request was a resounding no. I argued that they'd set a precedent by letting me in before, unauthorized or not. For accuracy's sake, they owed it to me and to the public, assuming I ever reached the end of my reporting, to let me in to recheck my notes. But because I'd never signed in anywhere, there was no record of my visits, they said, so it was like I'd never been there at all, even though I could show them the many files I had photocopied. When I persisted, they allowed me to make my case in person with the sheriff's captain of homicide. I arrived to find not one, but 3 deputies who'd invented a new reason to keep me out. I couldn't go back in, they said, because there was an open case against unnamed family members involving stolen credit cards. That couldn't be, I said. The statute of limitations on any type of theft by the family would have long run out. They didn't care. Sergeant Paul Delhauer, who had more or less seized control of the meeting, told me there was stuff you can never be told, will never know about, regarding the case. Then he showed me the door. When I'd been in the Lasso archive all those years ago, it had been Delhauer's job to decide who got access and who didn't. For that reason, the sheriff's office had decided he was the guy who had to take my calls now. So I did call him again and again and again after that. We got on each other's nerves and our conversations devolved into intense acrimony. What happened as far as you getting access to those materials, he said with an air of martyrdom. Martinet was a huge no-no. Del Hauer accepted this no-no wasn't my fault, and in his more charitable moments, he allowed that it put me in a tricky position, but he didn't see what he could do to help. I don't really care, Tom, he said. I see absolutely no significance to those questions. They have nothing to do with the resolution of the case. They have nothing to do with the scope of the investigation. I told him about Watnick's theory that Manson might have been an informant. This is rank speculation, he said. I honestly find this appalling. Well, of course it was speculation. That was the one reason I tried to get back into the files to see if there was any validity to it. I don't get paid to do your research, Delhauer said. Everybody seems to be jumping to conclusions about some big grandiose thing, he said. Worn down by my persistence, Delhauer finally agreed to remind Sheriff Baca of his long ago offer of the sheriff department's cooperation. If I wrote a letter to Baca, Delhauer would make sure he received it. When Baca didn't respond to my letter, I was unrelenting, following up constantly. At last, I was granted an interview with the sheriff himself, who, it became apparent, had been thoroughly briefed on the angle I was pursuing. Elected to his post in 1998, Baca had become a major figure in California law enforcement. Heading the nation's largest sheriff office, he oversaw 18,000 employees with a jurisdiction covering more than 4,000 square miles. Known as a strict enforcer with a no-nonsense style, he was at the peak of his power in November of 2005 when we met at his headquarters. I followed the tall, lean lawman as he marched down the hall to his office, large and comfortably furnished, with ceramic sculptures from Asia and three-dimensionally lit floor-to-ceiling trophy cases. Hanging on a wall was a framed quote of Baca from the Los Angeles Times. We need to carefully concern ourselves with the feelings of other individuals and not engage in rhetoric that just inflames divisiveness. We sat at a coffee table. I was on a couch. He was in an easy chair, tan and slightly stooped, wearing his uniform. Making it clear that the meeting was going to be brief, He suggested I get right to my point. I wanted to get back in the files, I said, to learn why his department had been so lenient on Manson. Baca fixed me with an unblinking, unnerving stare and said, "The reality is that Charles Manson is an individual was a dopehead, a weirdo, a cultist, and a control freak. Charlie's not a guy who's going to get pimped by a cop. He seemed pretty fearless of them," I said. When they went to the ranch, he told them he had men in the hills with guns on them. It further exemplifies that he doesn't need anyone to help him. You know, look at the obvious here. He's not reliable even in terms of his own conditions. Now, if he's not reliable in defining himself, how is he going to be reliable in defining something useful for the cops? Oh, I'm yawning. Lee is missing. Lee Baca got caught hiding prisoners in the jail in downtown LA from federal investigators. Oh my. Most of what he said followed this line of thinking. Manson was too unstable to be of use to law enforcement. As for Gunther and Whiteley's backing away from the case, he didn't want to touch it. Every sheriff I interviewed, I told him, said they couldn't get around the fact that Gunther and Whiteley didn't go to the ranch. I think that only they can account for why they didn't go, he said. It's interesting in the pursuit of criminals, even when you're on the hot trail and something distracts the efforts that you're on into. Shit. Sorry. I'm going to start that over. I think the only I'm going to take a drink. I'm going to look away. I'm going to look at the chat. My mom was born and raised in LA, so I spent some time up there, San Pedro and so forth. Beau Soleil, Beau Soleil, Beau Soleil. Thank you guys for cheerleading me in the comments, in the chat. The chat's the best part of this channel. All right. I think that only they can account for why they didn't go, he said. It's interesting in the pursuit of criminals, even when you're on the hot trail and something distracts the efforts that you're into, you'll say, I'll do that tomorrow. And then tomorrow is going to interfere with some other damn thing. And then before you know it, it's a whole week that's gone by. I reminded him that this wasn't any old murder case. Gunther and Whiteley truly believed that their case was tied into the biggest unsolved murder in Los Angeles history, a crime that had the city living in fear. I can assure you that they aren't part of a larger deal-making person with a guy like Charles Manson. You can't hide something like that. If I present it this way, I said, implying that he was leaving me no other option, they're going to look like bad cops. Incompetent, not bad. Our meeting ended almost as quickly as it started. Baca, who'd kept me waiting more than an hour, had to get to dinner in Pasadena. We walked out together, trailed by his driver. Out in the dusk, he turned to me before we parted ways. If you'd like a little more assistance, I will get you in touch with someone who does run informants and let you throw that hypothetical at them, he said. Thinking of Manson, he added, he's a weirdo. What kind of cop is going to rely on a weirdo for anything? I didn't say anything. I knew it was useless. The sheriff has his mind made up before he met me. As his driver pulled up in his sedan, Baca gave me a final once-over as if not certain what to make of me. Then he shook his head, getting into his car, said, you got Hollywood fluff like Marilyn Monroe was murdered. That's what you got. But that's good. That's what sells books. Baca retired in 2014. In 2017, a grand jury found him guilty of obstructing an FBI investigation into inmate abuse in Los Angeles County jails. He was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. Before a packed courtroom, a U.S. district judge told him, your actions embarrass the thousands of men and women who put their lives on the line every day. They were a gross abuse of the trust the public placed in you. Blind obedience to a corrupt culture has serious consequences. I found Baca contemptuous and condescending that day in 2005. He did, however, make good on his offer to me, putting me in touch with the head of the detective division, Commander Robert Osborne, who was the closest thing Lasso had to an expert on informants. I gave him my song and dance, well rehearsed by then, and while he found it unlikely that Manson had ever informed for his office, he said it was possible for a federal agency to call and ask for one of its informants to be released from Lasso custody. In such cases, they'd call the investigator. The captain would be uninvolved. It's possible that a phone call was made, yes, but what benefit would be gained by keeping it a secret forever? The theory that somebody asked them to do something different than the norm is not implausible, he admitted. Though I don't know why they wouldn't tell you. I can't imagine why they would want to keep it secret. I don't see anything to be gained if, in fact, there was some other agency involved in 1969 or in 2005 to keep that quiet. Unless, I thought, it resulted in the murder of innocent people. I sensed this was the closest thing to a concession I'd ever get from the LA County Sheriff's Office. I thanked Osborne for his time and went on my way. This is what desperation does to a writer. I knew that Gunther would be enraged if he learned that Baca had called him and Whiteley incompetent. I wondered if this might be what would finally get him to break the code of silence. The fact that he, one of the most legendary detectives in Lasso history, had been denigrated by the head of his former office. I didn't have the heart to tell him, but I did tell one of his friends who was understandably outraged. I had a hunch he'd share it with others, including Gunther, but it still took me 6 years to call him. When I did, he sounded tired and defeated, not like the Charlie Gunther I remembered. He still had a funny way of calling me by my full name in conversation. I want to close the door on that, Tom O'Neill, Gunther said. I want to end it with you. Lee Baca kind of upset me. Our conversation is over. I apologized and explained why I didn't think he was incompetent and why I was sure that anyone who knew his record didn't either, but it didn't break the wall. 20 years I did this, he said quietly, referring to his time in homicide. And Baca said I'm incompetent. I just want it to finish. Hell, I'm 83 years old. I just want to write the truth about why those murders happened, I said. I know what you're saying, Tom, and I'd like you to accommodate me. This is over 40 years ago, and I'd like to be out of it. Please, Tom O'Neill, I have no squabbles with you. I'm totally done. Gunther died in 2014. When was that conversation? Took him 6 years to call. Oh, 2011? I was heartbroken by the frailty I had heard in his voice that day, and I was confused. In the throes of my obsession with the case, I couldn't understand how such a celebrated detective would want to shut the door on it, to lose his drive to get to the bottom of it. But that was when I assumed I'd soon shut the door myself. Now, many more years have passed, and that door is still open, and I understand Gunther perfectly. Yes. Chapter 5 is done. Ooh, 270 gems. That's so nice. You guys, who's still here with me? Don't be shy. Pop up in the chat. Or I mean, I can go. Are you guys done? It's almost 2 hours. We got 10 more minutes. Let's do this for 10 minutes. Y'all. Hi, Mary. You're still here. And Abigail, you guys. I got to take this Alp out. I'm going to replace it immediately. They only last an hour. Did you get your Alps, Abby? How are they? How are they treating you? Really? It's almost 3? You guys are so rad. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you, Mary. I feel like I'm able to stay in the pocket longer. I feel like I'm getting better at this. I'm not tripping as much. I still do, and it makes me laugh at myself. But thank you guys for being here with me. I keep saying that I mean it, though. Pretty cool, Heretic. Thank you. I got my Alps wintergreen. 3 milligrams gave me a really nice Red Bull kind of buzz. Yes. Yes. It kind of it like separates the sounds in my head a little. But I've always, like I said before, I've always loved and leaned on nicotine. And I definitely am super scattered and like ever so anxious and a little pissy without it. And I'm like, oh, is that the addiction? Or is it just that I have been self medicating my ADHD with nicotine my whole life, most of my life? I use 6s, and I've been thinking about bumping it up to 9s because I am kind of back to back with them. Yep, yep. That reminds me of the Yip Yips from Sesame Street, from OG Sesame Street, the Yip Yips. They looked like bags and they had those big yip, 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 yip mouths. They were so silly and ridiculous, but I loved them. Should I pull up a Yip Yip? Do you know what I'm talking about? My geriatric millennials. South Texas. I just moved out of the top of Texas. Where in South Texas? Are you telling me to shush or are you like tee hee hee? Yep. Yep. Sesame Street. Oh, wow, look at these guys. I'm taking my phone off. To where? To the Midwest. It's a completely different biome. And the top of Texas is like Oklahoma, Texas. So it's flat, windy and dusty and like mildly bogus. Look at the yip yips. Look at them yip yips. Do you love them? I secretly love them. Let's go. Let's see more. Yip yips. And they only say like yip, 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 yip. How do you open the jar? With a knife? Oh, I just use my fingernail around it. Just stick it into the edge and pop it off. And I always put them into, like, I got this is my favorite case because of the attached trash lid. But this was a Velos pack and I took the sticker off, which doesn't leave a sticky residue, and I can keep it. 82 in Austin. The Yip Yips are cute. South Texas. They're old school. Mana do 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 do. Mana do 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 do. There they are. They had these cool like pipe cleaner eyebrows with little pom poms at the end. Or antennas. I guess they were antennas. Maybe I should be a Yip Yip for Halloween. They got great costumes. That's coming. I keep seeing leaves on the bike paths and I'm like, dang it, not yet. I'm not ready for summer to be done. It's been such a busy summer. Yes, Lubbock. I was in Pampa. And Pampa was featured on Yellowstone's final season. And that was kind of cool. Temecula, slot skater. Ooh, is that inappropriate? What kind of slot are you skating? It is so late. What are you doing up? Or is it early yet? It's early on a Monday. Or is that scary? What is it here? It was like, I think it was like 80 degrees max today. It was nice and cool and breezy. I grilled a bunch of meat. South Texas gambler. What do you play? Hold'em? Yip Yip just came here to talk about fart jars. Oh well. Oh my god, the Yip Yips are making me yawny because they're like mouths. You know how yawns are contagious? Look at this one specifically. Try not to yawn. Oh. I used to do that to my mom if we were on like a road trip. We used to do those a lot, but I would tell her to yawn repeatedly and she would keep yawning every time I said it. Yeah, yip, yip, yip. 105. I'm up in Wisconsin and I used to be in Texas where it's been 105 and 107 this past week. It is Sunday now. Oh yeah. See, I feel like because I looked up at the date on my laptop, it said Sunday, and I'm like, yeah, tomorrow's Monday. Yes, I read Michael Aquino's book Mind War. I don't know if you've seen that, but I have a whole playlist on that book. Um, and I thought it was super relevant because that was co-authored by a TPUSA board member. Co-authored, or I'm not sure if it was co-authored or commissioned. You saw it. Amazing. Yes. And JD Vance. Aquino is Erica Bransby's dad. JD Vance. Yeah. Ooh, let's look at that. Oops. Michael Aquino, Erica France. They pulled up Kirk, but I don't. She doesn't deserve that name. Here it is. I mean, this is so good. This is so good. Like, dang it, move. Here's my. Sorry. Oh, I already flipped it. Look at that. It's uncanny. Michael Aquino. Let's see. Scroll. Scroll. No, where? I did Michael Aquino and Erica Kirk, and it's showing. Look at that. Here, zoom out a little. What are we zoomed in for? Oh, yeah, the yip yips. Wait, it's like it could be both of them. Wait, so a yawn is also reflexive like a hiccup, though. It can be, it's to give your brain more oxygen, but if you see somebody else yawn, you're yawning. And I always tell my kids this too, like if they fall and get hurt, I tend to laugh and it's uncontrollable. I don't I don't mean harm to my but when they get real pissed off too, I giggle. I'm that kind of a I find that funny. And I'm not sure, I don't know where it came. Oh, I think my mom was the same way actually. But I always tell them it's a hiccup. I'm sorry, I can't control it. And I don't mean I don't it's not that I don't care. It's just and I don't know. Like fireworks displays make me cry. There's synesthesia. Is that what it's called? What is it when you cry easily? When you cry at movies or laugh when you're scared or something. It's called synesthesia. Important when it cries. Synesthesia? I think that's what it is. Let me Google just that word. Synesthesia is a perceptual phenomenon where stimulating one sensory or cognitive pathway leads to involuntary experiences in another. That's what it is. Synesthesia. Oh, no, no, no. That's where like but I do have that. I have that also. Like Thursday is purple. Um, do you know what I mean? Or like 3 to me is orange. I think that's synesthesia. But it can change, I guess. So I don't know. I don't know. Well, Slot Skater, what's your name? Are you still here with me? It's good to meet you. I'm so glad that you've seen that. You guys, I feel like coming on at midnight, more people who are interested in long form. Oh, I mean, I don't like I don't like I don't like it. I always want to giggle when my boys are super pissed off and expressing themselves. It fills my heart with joy to see them excited, even when they're a little pissed. Yeah, I think my kids are so cool. Like, I love how their brains work and they're so funny. Like, if even when they're pissed, like you guys, they give me their mean face, and I don't like um devalue them in that sense. Like I'm always accountable and like, here's what I'm actually feeling, even though I'm having trouble expressing that. And I feel like they experience that too. Like they'll sometimes get so angry that they can't express it in words, and they'll like want to throw something or stomp real hard or slam a door. And it's like I see that you are feeling all kinds of ways, and that is causing you to have trouble expressing yourself, but you can't slam my doors, that kind of thing. Like, do what your mom does, laugh. Oh, we also practice that sometimes. Like, I saw a video where a lady's like, do exactly what I do. You laugh once and then twice. So, like, ha, 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 and then ha, 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 and then ha, 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 ha. And you have to get all the way up to like 30 or something. But before you get to 30, you're laughing. And it's the I don't know if it's mirror neurons or what it is, but even if you're depressed, like powerfully depressed, if you fake a smile, it tells your brain to dump some dopamine or, or whatever it is. Dopamine. What's the other one? What's the other happy? What's the other happy hormone? Dopamine or serotonin. I think it's the serotonin one. All right, you guys. I feel like the chat is calming, and it's been over 2 hours. If you're here and you're too shy to say something, that's no fair. Just tell me hi. Let me see who made it through. Or I'm going to just go to bed. Hi, yours truly, Todd. Thank you for piping in, for chiming in, piping up, chiming in. Todd, did you watch the whole thing or did you just find me? Because I do a book club and we're reading this. And we're on chapter 6 tomorrow. Or should I take Monday off? I think everybody's, I don't know. Ooh, let's look at the pictures. There's pictures. No, yeah, all of this. Let's see. Oh, he was talking about all his books in this chapter, like his office space. There's Tom O'Neill's area. Cocaine. You just found me? Oh, oh, that's fun. I got a wedding coming up. I still need to find a dress. I'm getting there though. Oh, the next chapter is talking about Whitston, the shifting deal. Where's the next? Where are we at? Let's see. Yeah, who is Reeve Whitston? That's right. Oh no, it broke. My sweet. This was my dad's bookmark, and he got it for being a lifelong member. What's it say? It is a lifetime member of the History Channel. Wow, nuts. How did it come off? I'll have to fix this now. No, I got a +1. Why are you trying to crash a wedding? That's funny. Was it somebody you know and love? Or was it like a friend? Or did you crash a wedding? Oh, you said a friend. A friend's wedding. Geez, I'm gonna have to get after this later. Yes, you should. Good place to start's at a wedding. But you can't get too drunk when you're trying to meet a lady. Do I need an exclusive +1? What are your thoughts? I am taken and monogamous. Monogamy is so underrated. No, I don't do what I'm told. Plasma zombie. Your name looks familiar. Were you on recently? Did you get put in timeout for saying stuff? Yeah. Well, so I am with my ex-husband. We were divorced for 7 years and we've gotten back together. We're working on 3 years now that we've been back together. Yeah. You'll find yours. Pray for them before you even meet them. That's some good advice. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Um, Farts with wolves. That's funny. In Dances with Wolves, like I was a kid when I first saw it, and I was laughing so hard at it because he was talking about the foulest man he'd ever known. What's your blood type? Ugh. Um, anyway, that's what your name reminded me of, that one specific scene. There's nothing wrong with recital. Okay. You're whose second cousin? The foul guy in Dances with Wolves. Because I think after, like, Kevin Costner was narrating that he was the foulest man. And as he did, it was quite the fart. Aw, thanks. Do I have a potato in my ancestry? Aw, plasma. Yes. Yes. Is that what you're referencing with your name? That one scene that made me giggle as a child? That's funny. I like that. I like it when people get movie references. My bestie is almost a decade younger than me, and so I'll like spout off some like hilarious movie reference, and she just gives me a blank stare. I'm like, listen, now you have homework. What do you mean you haven't seen Wayne's World, girl? Because she, incidentally, her man piece is named Anthony. So I'm always like, who's Anthony? Who's Anthony? And she's like, what? It's my man. What do you mean? That's cool. It was a good movie. Kevin Costner was a badass. Except for Waterworld. What was that? The only cool thing about Waterworld was seeing. So this is post like shit hitting the fan, and they come across Tom Petty, and he's like, I'm not Tom Petty anymore. We all out here the same. Ah, and then we lost him. We lost Tom Petty. I saw somebody had a mug that said, I still miss Tom Petty, and I want that mug. I would like it. Oh, never mind. I'm gonna make a t-shirt. Actually, I will just tell you, I'm gonna make a t-shirt with my little logo on it. And on the back, I'm gonna have one that says Goy Lives Matter and another that doesn't say it. So you can be bold or you can be restrained. I don't need to become cute. I'm good with who I am. Yeah. I don't have much TV time anymore, but I have been watching. I can't wait for Landman to come back out, although they were dragging ass the last season. I sure hope they got something. I hope they come up with something. Goy and proud. Yeah. I mean, if is it working though? Cindy. Hello, Cindy. Love Billy Bob. Love Billy Bob Thornton. He was really good in Goliath. He's good in everything though. I didn't realize that he had written everything uh about Rain or not Rain Man. What movie is that? Shoot. Was it Rain Man? No, that was friggin' what's his name? That was the other guy. That was the other shoot. Sling Blade. Yeah, he's in Landman. Yeah, and his wife, she was an 80s starlet. I don't even know. She was in 90210, I think. Yeah, over a weekend. Gross, dude. That's a cow femur. I collect bones. And I can't wait to pull like I got a curio cabinet recently. I want to put a bunch of um what do you call that? Radium glass. How am I forgetting all of my favorite things right now? Um You know what I mean? The black light glass and my bones. I have like the spine and hip of a white-tailed deer. You restore bones? What do you mean? What do you mean? I have some skulls. You have an entire cat skeleton? Amazing. I have an entire it's either a possum or a raccoon. I'm not sure, but I have everything. I found it in an old trap on my mom's property. And I tried to collect every little tiny piece. And the hands are still in one piece because they're still connected. in woolly mammoth artifacts. Are you being serious? Are you being serious? You specialize in woolly mammoth artifacts? Did they clone? Did they splice DNA with a mammoth? That's amazing. Do you document it on YouTube? Do you have like shorts or anything? Do you show your process? Would you ever? You do? Oh, wait, that's the same yes as that you are serious. I wonder, do you friggin' document? I'll go follow, I'll go subscribe right now. Farts with Wolves. If you're still here, like the video. Yeah, right. They splice DNAs. No, that's okay. I'm not gonna friggin' meow for you. Oh, I said it. I said it. Does that count? All right, y'all. We're at an hour. We're at 120 minutes is an hour. We're at 135. So it's bedtime. It's time to go. Super cool to connect with some of you new folks. That doesn't count then, you're saying? On the list is Sigmund Freud and the Jewish mystical tradition. I read that. No, but some of my work is online. If you look up Big Blue Alaskan Mammoth, you will see some of my work. I'm going to screenshot that so that I can go look. 2 hours. Isn't that what I said? 120 minutes? And listen to me, not only because an hour is 60 minutes. What did I say? So 2 is 120, but 120 minutes was the MTV2 show that they tried to match Headbangers Ball with. But they had more like 120 minutes. It was more inclusive with pick what was his name? Matt Pinfield. I had fun hanging out too. Thanks, Nick, for being here and for showing up in the chat. I'll see y'all tomorrow night. Okay, bye. I'm gonna go. You did the tusks on it. Oh my goodness. That's so cool. I'm gonna look that up. And I'm glad you made your way here and that you said hello to me tonight. That stuff's fascinating. I buried my mastiff, and my mom, she hates it. And he's buried on her property. But I eventually want to go get his skull, and I think I would be able to make a really beautiful tribute to him. What he was a 160-pound mastiff, English mastiff, and he was only 6 when he died. So I wasn't ready for it, but I want to get that skull out and make my little memorial something. I'm gonna do something with it. All right, y'all. I'll see you later. Thanks for being here. Bye. I know it's morbid. Sorry. Don't judge. We listen. We don't judge.